In this video, I'm going to show you how to load in a word frequency list and then use it to calculate the word frequency of a given text. So I've chosen this 50,000 word frequency list that's up here on GitHub, and you can see it has the word and they're all lowercase, and then it has a frequency score. So I don't know exactly how these scores are calculated, but higher numbers mean that it's more frequent. So these are all very frequent words, and then down at the bottom are less frequent words, see, with smaller numbers. So these words might not be perfect, but they're going to be good enough to give us a sense. Now, just another thing to keep in mind is the corpus that the frequency comes from. So you can have one that's made from contemporary fiction or one from classic fiction. You can have a frequency list from Shakespeare. The one that we're using is actually more of a spoken language one, used from the captions and subtitles that are found in videos. All right, so the basic idea is that we are going to load this list, which I've added here to texts. I'm going to load it in and split it into a dictionary where you can look up this number based on this key. All right. So let's start with that. Let's write a function. And we'll call it load frequency, load freq, like that. And we will pass in the source file. We'll call it src. Okay. So we've already written this function that will just load in a file and read it into a string. So let's do that first. All right. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go through each line in the list and then split it into the two things and put it into a dictionary, right? So okay, so that's the plan, and then at the end we're going to return it. All right, so up here, let's create an empty map. Okay. And we're going to add the keys. Now, we're going to split our text into lines. And the way that we're going to do that is by looking at a special character called a new line. And what we're going to do is text.split. And we've seen this before in console.log when we want a few new lines in a row. But this is called an escape character. It's a backslash and then an end for new line. So we should be able to get one line at a time here. All right. And then let's start to loop through it. So I'm going to show you a new loop. I mean, it's covered in the textbook chapter when we talk about arrays, but this is the for of loop in JavaScript, and it's a nice, easy way for us to iterate through every item of an array. So here we have an array of strings split into a line. So let's do for let line of lines. That's the entire syntax. And now inside our loop, we have a variable called line, which will be that string. We don't need to get it out at lines I or increment anything. So this is a nice, concise loop that JavaScript offers for us. All right, so the next thing we need to do is split the line into the word and the frequency. So let's do that. We'll call it parts. And here we're just going to use a space. All right. And then map. The first part will be the word. Okay. that should do it. So let's just take a look here again at what our text actually looks like. So when we split it, we're doing two splits. First, we're going to split this invisible character at the end to break it into lines so we can read it one line at a time. And then we're going to split on the space so that part 0 is the word itself and part 1 is the frequency. All right. Let's go back here and let's just try this out over here in the console. I'm going to run it. And let's say let FRE get load freak, and the source is going to be in a file called text / word freak.txt. All right, so if this worked, then we'll get the map into this variable called FRE. So I see that I made a little mistake up here when I put the path, all right, the directory and the name of the file I want to load. It's actually called texts, and I put text. So I'm going to hit the up arrow, and we're just going to load that again with the right path. I guess it wants me to use let. I thought it would have created a variable. No. All right, let's start from the beginning so that we're not confused here. And did we get it right? Okay, let's load that. Okay, so now if I want to look up the frequency of the word you or the, all right. So one thing I'm seeing, and we can account for this in a second, is that it's loading it correctly, but remember we loaded the whole thing as a string. So these values are strings, but we're going to want to be able to compare them and do averages and things. So let's make this a little bit better by creating a number instead. Now let's run that. All right. And let's see. Cat. Let's try dog. All right, dogs are slightly more common than cats, actually, quite a bit more. All right, so first thing we've done, we've loaded this frequency and put it into a map. Now, let's add one more item where we're actually going to calculate the average frequency of the words in a text. Okay, so let's write that. Function average freak, and we will pass in the text and the frequency map. All right, and we'll just call this the actual source. So we'll take the text. That way we can read it one time and then pass it around. So let's do this. We know, well, let's create a variable, average, get 0, let total, get 0, let count, get 0. Okay. We actually aren't really going to need the average. So we know that to find the average, we're going to divide the total by the number of items, right? So the sum by the number of items. So what we want to do is go through this text, and you know what? Let's take an array of words, because probably what we're going to do is break it into an array of words and then use that for a bunch of different functions. So this will make our program, as we add more things, more efficient. So let's just write another quick function, and we'll call it get words from a text. All right. So what this will do is strip out the punctuation, make sure that there are no spaces and things like that, and then return it into an array. So let's say let words get text.split, and we can use this special /w, which should be a word boundary. We'll just use the special /s, which means any white space. So that way we can split it if it's a space or if it's a new line. And this is / and then the regular expression character or the escape character and /. All right. So first we're going to get the words. Then we're going to remove the punctuation, and we'll just call clean to do that. So we'll just call it s, be an empty string, let punctuation, and let's use our backticks for this. So we'll take out all the quotes, all of the regular punctuation, brackets, parentheses, all of these things. All right, so now we have a fairly complete list of punctuation here. And then let's use that for of loop again. Let's say for let char for each character of the word. And the idea is if it's not one of these special characters, then we will append it to this s. If not, pun dot includes char. So if it's not in the punctuation, then s will plus equals the character. And let's not put any spaces in there either. Okay. Although there shouldn't be any spaces because we've already split on the spaces, but we'll just take it out just in case. When we're done, we have the clean word, which is s, return s. Okay. So we're going to get the words, and we will create a new array of clean words that'll be empty. And then for that word of words, clean words.push, we add it to that array. We clean up our word, and then we return clean words. All right. We've got some real stuff going on here. We're still working on average frequency, but let's go down to main and let's actually load in one of our texts. So here are the options. Let's load Ulysses. And Teen Vogue. All right. I can change that from const to let because I'm actually going to we're going to split this up so that we load it and then we clean it. So let's Ulysses gets get words, Ulysses, all right. And we'll do the same with Vogue. All right. So when we run main, we have two texts, and let's just make sure that everything works. All right. It was a little slow because it's actually doing a lot of work now. But it seems to be working. All right. And now what we're going to do is we're going to pass these words into average frequency. We also need to load our frequency map. So we're going to call this and this will be const. We'll call it freak map. Okay, it's called word freak.txt. Okay. So let you average get and average freak. We'll pass in Ulysses and freak map. All right. So now we're passing. Let's just take a look at Ulysses here. We're to pass these words in, and we're going to get the average frequency of all the words in here. And if the word doesn't exist at all in our map, we just won't count it. We'll ignore it. And maybe in your analysis, you'll also count those to give you a better sense of the challenge of the text or the difficulty, because if there are a lot of proper nouns and a lot of scientific words or words that are completely outside of our frequency, they might be slang. It's just going to make it a more difficult to read. But let's go back to our code. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for every word in there. We're only going to count the ones that we find in our frequency map. All right. And if it's not in there, we won't increment the count and we won't add it to the total. So for let word of words, and hopefully you're getting used to seeing this for of loop because I keep using it and it's really pretty nice. So let's get a variable called frequency, and that will be freak map for this word. Now, if we find it, we get a number, and if we don't find it, we're going to get undefined. So we can just use the truthy test. So if frequency is a thing, then it means we found the word. If this is true, if it's any number other than 0, it'll be true. So if it existed in the key as a key, then we will count plus plus total plus equals frequency. All right, and we're going to go through the entire list of words and find the frequency, and then we will return this as an average, which is the total divided by the count. Okay, so let's get a U average for Ulysses and a V average for Vogue, and then print out our results. And if everything works, that will be it for this video, and hopefully this will be helpful code if you choose to work on the word text analysis rating project for your final. Okay, so let's just say console.log be the U average. Oops. And then we'll do the same. Teen Vogue, word frequency, V average. And we will run this and see if it works. Okay, so let's just trim them down and line them up so it's easier to compare them. So I made a few changes while I had the video paused. One, I actually decided to change the text that we're using to use two that are much more similar to each other, the New York Times and the New York Post op-ed articles. And because they're going to be about the same length and written in the same genre and so on. So then I just formatted it so that they're lined up and we can see them more easily. I trimmed it down to 2 decimal places. And when we run it, we see that the New York Post, the words are slightly more frequent than the New York Times, as higher numbers mean more frequent. If you want, you can try it with any or all of the text in here. You could do an array and loop through all of them and print it out. There are many different ways you can look at it, but this is about what we would expect. They're fairly similar to each other with, a slight difference in the frequency of the words in New York Times being written maybe at a slightly more difficult reading level than the New York Post. All right, so let me just recap this video. Let's take a look. Because we've actually done a lot of things and gone through some new things. I created a word frequency file, okay, and it is called wordfreak.txt. All right, it's a plain text file, and then we wrote code where we loaded that. So we read in the source using this read file function that I've included for you. We create an empty map. We split the text into lines using this new line character, and we use the for of loop to loop through it. We then split it at the space, and we create a map that maps the word to its frequency. All right, and the way that this frequency is written is that higher numbers are more frequent words, lower numbers are less frequent words. Okay, we return the map when we're done. Then I wrote a nice generic getWords function that splits the text using this special regular expression, which is any white space character. All right, so it's new lines, it's spaces, it's tabs, it'll split on any of them. And then we create a new array where we clean the words, where we take out the punctuation using this function that's basically like one that we've already written. All right. Then in our main function, we load the frequency. We get the words from the Times. We get the words from the Post. We calculate the averages, and we print out a message. All right. Good luck. Happy coding. And I'm looking forward to seeing your projects.